Hey, welcome to the process. My name is Dr. John Bush. This is ADP versus end of the season PPR points by positions. We're hitting running backs part 5. Obviously, you should see the other parts, and we're going. Let's see what we got. So what I've done is looked at each draft sector here, put the player, put their fantasy points at the end of the year. So now you see where they were drafted, what ended up, and you can kind of see the successes in green and the failures bottom 30% in red, and the mid pack is not colored here, so you can get a sense of how's it been last few years. So last year we had Eckler and McCaffrey, big difference, but actually historically Eckler's 193 wasn't bad at all. It was in the top 30% over the last 9 years. So that's about all you can ask for here, but that just kind of shows you. And if you look, and I divided the first 4 years, 15 to 18, about 19 to 23, just for you to get a snapshot. Preceding years is a little bit tricky here. Wasn't as much a success as it has been in recent years. So this idea that it's just a slam dunk is not true. You need to be aware of that. Bottom half of the first round, a lot of successes, some mid-pack, certainly some failures in the preceding years. So right away, you're seeing why I divided 18 to 15 versus 19 to 23. We haven't seen the level of failures in a long time. Don't know if we're overdue, but there it is. And we continue down, and you start seeing different sectors here and what's produced. So I love this. You can track kind of where your person was drafted and where they ended up. And notice here we're hitting our first failure in a long time. 31 to 33, that was Carson back in 21. A lot of mid-pack. Last year we had great success in this range. So you were doing quite well there. So next year, Aaron Jones got hurt a lot, but Najee Harris, not bad at all. And so I have this just historical for you to look at and kind of get a sense of what was going on, what was happening in the different draft rounds. So it's kind of an expectation, getting back to the reference class forecasting concept. So I'll try to have these figures up for on the Science of Fantasy Football website once I get all this up. There's no big hurry right now. It's March 8th here when I'm doing this, and just passing through a few of these here. And you start seeing, you hit levels here that a lot of failures. So it gets really risky here, and some successes. And so we'll move on, but I've got a lot of that if you want to see what it starts to look like. Okay, another way to look at this is to actually count the percentage of the total drafted in each sector, how many were top, mid, and bottom. So top 30% last 9 is here, last 9 years. Mid-pack, mid 40% last 9, and the bottom 30% last 9. So I generated, here's the numbers and here's the percentages. I think a little bit more, you can get clear what's going on. First round, 70% success. What can I say? Not bad. Next round, a little bit of hit or miss in round historically sector 13 to 18. 19 to 24 is almost like the first round. So probably the first two rounds, and again, we've talked about this before, but another way to look at it, you're fairly going to be fairly successful in the 80s, 70s, maybe even 60% success rate. Not bad. Notice the next rounds, we're hitting in the 40s and we're getting mid-pack. Low failure rate, we get a little bit of blip right here. And notice at about round 49 to 54 and down, it gets really thin on successful players. There are a few, but now the mid-pack is taking over. And then the low guys start taking over probably about round 115 or so, going down, or not round 150, sector ADP 115. So you can kind of see the top, the mid lasts a long time, and then the bottom. There's some noise in here of some of the failures that are sprinkled around. So when you look at the overall trends from the different rounds, the top is in green, and we see the decay rate high, and then it bottoms out at around 60. And then hits another bottom at around 115. So the purple is the mid, so not a lot of mid, and they intersect the top at about 42, and then they predominate. The losers go up, 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 and almost linear, and really take off at about 121, maybe 124, 127, I guess. So it gets a sense as you're drafting kind of the landscape, what's going on at each block here. This is material you need to know and to understand. You don't need to stop in your draft and look at it. This just should be coming with you here. And I've showed variants of this concept here about what's going on, but this just puts it out visually for you to look at. I think I've showed this before, the different years and the sectors and the successes. And again, I've showed the tops, the bottoms, and the mids. I try to colorize it a little different. Then I did a top versus bottom skew. And we, like I said, first two rounds, very little failure rate. The next group to about 78, you have this. And then after that, lots of failures relative to the top. Not a lot of top, but a lot more failures. So you can kind of graph it like that. And this is the other way to look at that ratio. And again, the tops, first two rounds, and then a decline. We get a little blip up here. That may be that 9th round, 10th round blip, and then a decline. Failures, the red, and the mid-pack, again, right here. So, I mean, the trend is not changing from this. It's just another way to look at it. This ratio, I think, is an interesting thing here. Metric to look at. And again, so your plan, if you decide you want to do a solid RB, you need to make your move first two rounds. If you're going 0 RB, folks, let me tell you, it's getting lean out there after about the first couple rounds, maybe certainly after the first 3 rounds. So just be aware that the fish that you're catching in later rounds tend to be more mid-pack and not top dogs. And that needs to be clear. Variation at this time is changing as well. I tracked the variation versus the actual ADP average, and here's the points. And if you track that, and to me, variance is in blue. Not a lot of variance is occurring. You start getting some more static, but that stays fairly constant. Then towards the end, we're starting to get a lot more variation here. So that's kind of the uncertainty levels. And you can start seeing kind of how that relates to the points that you're getting here, just for you to look at and get a sense of what's going on. Another way to look at it is variations here. Normalized RB variation and quarterback variation in the purple. And we see a lot more almost extremely low variation in quarterbacks in the first elite quarterbacks that you're drafting. And RBs, you're not, I mean, they're low, but it's not changing. It doesn't change to about maybe what, 6th round, 5th round, 6th round. And then it stays kind of constant, the uncertainty, and then it goes up again. So you kind of have fairly good uncertainty, low uncertainty, kind of mid-level uncertainty, and then high uncertainty. With quarterbacks, extremely low uncertainty. Then it peaks up here, and the mid-pack uncertainty is about 37 here to about 84. So low, mid, high. So right away, RBs and quarterbacks, as far as levels of uncertainty, are really different. And the quarterbacks, it's kind of more highs and lows. Very low uncertainty here. I thought that was really interesting. And I finally did just track the number of players drafted for running backs in each round. And notice it's gone up a lot. And last year we only drafted 5 RBs in the first round. We haven't seen anything that low. So last year was an anomaly that way. And if you look at the box and whiskers, it's fairly constant. But this shows clearly things are happening here. And, okay, so I think counting the number of players of a position being drafted gives us some insight into the nature of that year's kind of crop, if you want to call it that way. So 2023, rounds 3, 4, 5 had a lot more RBs drafted than the preceding year. In fact, 2022, look how many RBs were drafted in the first 2 rounds. 13 versus last year 8. Big difference. In fact, 13, year before, 13, 14, 12, 14, 12, 9, 11. So 2023 was the lowest number of RBs drafted in the first 2 rounds. That kind of can skew your thinking, because last year you did X, you won a lot or whatever, based on something that was really a strange year that way. Okay, it was a very different year. So I think that can clue us in. I did talk a little bit about the box and whiskers. Didn't see a lot of dramatic situation here, distribution. But what I think it really get interesting, and pardon the formatting here, but what you see is the year and the number of RBs drafted. And the draft round average PPR. So knowing the number of RBs and what was the average that came out of that crop for that year, if we look at that ratio, we get an idea of how efficient then that crop was for our fantasy teams. So if we look at that metric, let's call it, take the average, like 110, so 111 divided by 6 is 18.5. Okay. This is 175.7 divided by 6 is 29.6. So, even though there was low RBs drafted, very high efficiency, last year the public was on fire first 2 rounds. Look how efficient that was. If you look at the top 30% over the 9 years, best we've ever had for round 1 is if you consider this efficiency. We haven't seen that at all. I think RBs were overdrafted 20 and 21. See, so you can start getting new ways to describe a situation. And then compared to your diary, how did it unfold for you? Were your RBs you drafted last year really good? If you got them in the first 2 rounds, probably. Notice there was a lot more drafted in the 3rd, 4th, 5th, and 6th, but the efficiency dropped because there was a lot more in that total average. So the public was right on here, but they missed in these rounds and then picked it up again. And look at round 9. We had got some hints about round 9. And if you look historically, we've had 4 really spectacular years of efficiency in round 9 as far as RB drafting. And if you look at the efficiency distribution here, this is last year in green, really spectacular. Now, the box pretty large, but look that almost half the box from last year was above the box tops for all the preceding years. Very strange year. I'm telling you, there's some more something that needs to be thought about here. When I see this kind of data, I'm thinking there's more here than I understand. So sometimes metrics and research that you'll do, you'll end up with something like this. It's like, well, why is it? Where did that come from? In other words, nothing in the preceding 8 years would have predicted this kind of difference. Nothing. Almost a black swan event happened last year in RBs. So I like my concept of draft efficiency by positions looking across the top 10 draft rounds. I think it's really, really intriguing. So I kind of leave you with that just for you to remember things were a little bit strange last year, like a lot strange. So don't expect 2024 to be that same way given the preceding 8 years before that. Just don't get surprised. Be cautious. Okay. Anyway, that's all I've got to say for RBs in this small cut of landscape data. And I'm starting with WRs next. So we'll knock that out next draft lesson. Okay. My dog's excited. So this is Dr. Bush for the science of fantasyfootball.com. Come back. We're going WRs next.